She didn't look like someone who owned anything. That was what they decided. The moment Claudette Osei stepped off the elevator on the 43rd floor of the Harborview Grand, Toronto's most celebrated luxury hotel, still wearing her late mother's wool coat. Dome being melt, the one with the fraying hem and the two mismatched buttons, carrying a manila envelope tucked under one arm and a travel mug of Tim Hortons coffee in the other hand. She looked to the staff behind the private check-in desk on the Pinnacle Level, like someone who had taken the wrong elevator, and they were going to make sure she knew it. If you've ever walked into a room and felt the temperature drop the moment people looked at you, not because of anything you said, not because of anything you did, but simply because of the way you looked, then you already understand what happened to Claudette Osei on that Tuesday morning in March. And if you haven't, stay with this story because it will show you something about power that most people never get to witness. Like this video if you believe that dignity is not determined by what you're wearing. And subscribe to every story we tell here is about people who were counted out and counted themselves back in. Claudette had driven 4 hours from Hamilton that morning. She hadn't slept particularly well. Her mother, Dorothy Osei, had passed 11 days earlier, and the paperwork that comes after a person dies is relentless in the way only bureaucracy can be. Cold, indifferent, and absolutely unwilling to wait for grief to finish its work. She hadn't changed out of the coat. It had been her mother's coat. Dorothy had bought it decades ago at a church sale in Scarborough, and worn it every winter without apology. It smelled faintly of lavender, of the drawer sachets her mother kept in every closet of the house on Fennell Avenue. Claudette had pulled it on that morning without thinking. The way you reach for the familiar when everything else feels unstable, and she hadn't taken it off since. The envelope under her arm contained documents that a solicitor in Hamilton had spent 3 weeks preparing. Legal documents. Transfer documents. The kind of documents that change things permanently. She pressed the button for the 43rd floor and the elevator rose. The Pinnacle Level of the Harborview Grand was not advertised to the general public. It existed on the hotel's website as a single tasteful line. Private suite collection. By arrangement only. The floor had its own dedicated reception area. Pale marble, low lighting, a long desk of polished walnut. And at any given time, 2 or 3 staff members whose entire job was to make the right people feel immediately, effortlessly welcome. Claudette Osei stepped off the elevator, and the nearest staff member, a young woman whose name tag read Serena, looked up from her screen. The smile that had been forming on Serena's face did not fully arrive. "Can I help you?" she said. The words were correct. The tone was not. "Yes," Claudette said. "I'm here to meet with your general manager. I have a 10 o'clock. Serena glanced at her screen, then back at Claudette, then at the manila envelope, then at the Tim Hortons cup. She said nothing for a moment that lasted slightly too long. "Your name?" "Claudette Osei." Another pause. The kind of pause that communicates very efficiently that the person on the receiving end does not belong here and is being tolerated rather than welcomed. "I don't see a booking under that name," Serena said. "It would be under the property file," Claudette said. "Not a guest reservation. I spoke with someone named." She set the coffee cup on the edge of the desk and reached into her coat pocket for her phone. "Raymond Ashford. He confirmed yesterday." Serena's expression did not change. "I'm not familiar with that appointment. This level is reserved for registered suite guests and their pre-approved visitors. If you'd like, I can have someone from our general concierge desk on the lobby level assist you." There it was. Not a question, not a clarification, a redirection. Downstairs. Back to where she apparently belonged. Claudette looked at Serena for a moment. She had learned, over the course of her 61 years, that there were 2 ways to respond to this particular kind of dismissal. The first was to get loud. The second was to get quiet. She had tried both in her lifetime, and she had learned, definitively, which one served her better. She got quiet. "I'd prefer to wait here," she said. "If you could let Raymond Ashford know I've arrived, I'd appreciate it." Serena straightened slightly. "Ma'am, I've explained." "You've explained that you don't see my appointment," Claudette said. She was not unkind. She was not aggressive. She was simply precise. "I'm asking you to call Mr. Ashford and confirm." That's all. There was a second staff member at the far end of the desk. His name tag read Dominic. He had been watching this exchange with the particular alertness of someone who is trying to decide whether to get involved. He had not yet decided. It was the third person who changed the dynamic. Her name was Philippa Voss, and she was the Pinnacle Level's Senior Guest Relations Manager. A title that meant, in practice, that she had worked at the Harborview Grand for 19 years. She had dealt with every category of difficult situation the hospitality industry could produce. And she had developed, over those 19 years, a very specific confidence in her own judgment. Philippa Voss walked out from the corridor behind the desk, glanced at Claudette, and made a decision in approximately 2 seconds. "Is there a concern here?" she said, directing the question at Serena rather than at Claudette, which was itself a statement about where Philippa believed the problem was located. "This guest," Serena began. "This woman," Claudette said, and her voice was still calm, still measured, "says she has a 10 o'clock with Raymond Ashford. She's been waiting while I look into it." Serena blinked. Philippa turned to the screen and typed something. Then she typed something else. Her expression, as she read what appeared on the screen, did a complicated thing. "What did you say your name was?" she said. "Claudette Osei." Another silence. This one felt different from the first one. This one felt like the kind of silence that happens when someone's found information they were not expecting to find. "OSEI?" Philippa said. "That's right." Philippa looked at the screen again. She looked at Claudette. She looked at the manila envelope. She picked up the phone on the desk and dialed an internal number. She said quietly, "Raymond, it's Philippa. Your 10 o'clock is here." A pause. "Yes, on the floor." Another pause, longer. "All right." She set the phone down. "Mrs. Osei," she said, and the shift in her voice was audible. Not dramatic, not theatrical, but real. The way a room changes when someone opens a window. "Mr. Ashford will be right out. Can I get you anything while you wait? Coffee? Still water? We have a seating area just." "I'm fine," Claudette said. She picked up her Tim Hortons cup. "Thank you." Serena had gone very still now. Before Raymond Ashford walks through that door, and he will in just a moment, it's worth pausing here, because this is the part of the story where most people would want Claudette to say something, to make a speech, to turn to Serena, and deliver the kind of precise, devastating line that replays on loop in your head at 2 in the morning when you're thinking about every situation in your life where you didn't say the right thing. But Claudette didn't say anything, and that, if you understand anything about real dignity, is the more powerful choice. Raymond Ashford was 54 years old, silver-haired, wearing the kind of suit that announced itself quietly. He came through the corridor door with that slightly accelerated gait of a man who had just been told, privately, that he had made an error. Not him personally, but his floor, his staff, which amounted to the same thing. "Miss Osei," he said, extending his hand. "Raymond Ashford, General Manager. I'm very glad you're here. Please, come through." He gestured toward the corridor. Claudette followed him. She did not look back at Serena. She didn't need to. Raymond Ashford's office was on the 43rd floor, at the corner, with a view across Lake Ontario that on a clear March morning was genuinely extraordinary. The water gray-green and wide, the city skyline behind them, the CN Tower visible from the south-facing window. Claudette sat down across from Raymond's desk and set the manila envelope on the table between them. "First," Raymond said, "I want to express my condolences on the loss of your mother. Dorothy Osei was. She was a remarkable person. I want you to know that everyone here at the Harborview Grand felt her passing very deeply." Claudette nodded. She had been receiving condolences for 11 days, and she had learned to receive them without letting them undo her in public. "Thank you," she said. "She was a guest here for 31 years, Claudette said. "She booked her first suite here in 1994. She used to say it was the only hotel in Toronto where the beds were worth the price." Raymond smiled. It was a real smile. That sounds exactly like her. Here is what Serena did not know. Here is what Dominic did not know. Here is what Philippa Voss, 19 years of experience in all, did not know when she walked out and assessed Claudette Osei in her late mother's wool coat. Dorothy Osei had come to Toronto from Kumasi, Ghana in 1981 with a nursing qualification, $40 Canadian, and the kind of practical stubbornness that is sometimes described by people who possess it simply as not having the option to give up. She had worked at Toronto General for 6 years. She had saved. She had bought a duplex, saved more, bought another property. Town, then another. Over 30 years she had assembled. Quietly, without announcement, without anyone who looked at her, asking if she needed help finding the lobby, a real estate portfolio that included commercial properties in 3 provinces. One of them was the building that housed the Harborview Grand. The hotel had been a tenant for 22 years. Dorothy had never made a point of announcing her ownership to the staff. She had stayed as a guest in the suites she technically owned the walls of, tipped generously, asked the housekeeping staff their names, and remembered the answers. She had been, in every interaction, precisely the person she was. A woman of considerable means, and no interest whatsoever in performing that fact for anyone's benefit. And now, Dorothy Osei was gone, and the building, along with the rest of the portfolio, had passed to her only daughter. Claudette opened the manila envelope and placed the documents on Raymond Ashford's desk. Transfer of ownership. Confirmation of the new sole proprietor of the Osei Property Group, registered in Ontario, with holdings that included the commercial tower at 217 Harbour Street, the tower that, from its 38th to 45th floors, contained every room, every corridor, every polished walnut desk and low-lit reception area that constituted the Harborview Grand Pinnacle Level. Raymond Ashford read through the first page, then the second. He had already known this was coming. The solicitor had been in contact 2 weeks ago. But seeing the documents in front of him, seeing the signature lines, made it real in a way that phone calls do not. "Everything looks in order," he said. His voice was measured, professional, but underneath it there was something that sounded like a man recalibrating. "It should," Claudette said. "The solicitor is thorough." Raymond set the documents down. He looked at Claudette. "Mrs. Osei, I want to address what happened when you arrived." Claudette looked at him steadily. She did not make it easy for him, but she did not make it hard. She simply waited. "The staff member at the desk. I'll be handling that personally. What happened was not acceptable. It was not reflective of our standards, and I want you to know that I take full responsibility for the culture on this floor." "I appreciate that," Claudette said. "I'd like to talk to you about something, if I may." "Of course." She set her Tim Hortons cup on the edge of his desk. There was something in the gesture, the ordinary cup in the extraordinary room, that felt like a small, deliberate thing. A reminder of something. "My mother never told your staff that she owned this building," Claudette said. "Not once in 31 years. I asked her about it once," she said. And here, for the first time since she had arrived, her voice shifted, just slightly, the way a held thing shifts when the grip loosens by a fraction. She said that she didn't need anyone to treat her well because of what she owned. She wanted to be treated well because it was the right way to treat a person. Raymond Ashford was quiet. "I'm going to honor that," Claudette said. "I'm not here to make trouble. I intend to be a fair and reasonable building owner. I have no interest in disrupting the hotel's operations, and I've been told by the solicitor that everything will continue as normal under the existing lease arrangement." She picked up her coffee cup again. "But I am going to ask you to review your staff training. Not because of what happened to me this morning. Because of what happens to people every morning in places like this when no one is paying attention and there are no documents in a manila envelope to change the calculation." Raymond Ashford nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, "and I agree with you." Out on the Pinnacle Level, Serena had not moved far from the desk. She had served guests since the conversation with Raymond Ashford's office ended. She had offered still water and called for luggage assistance and answered 2 questions about restaurant reservations. She had done all of this with the professional ease of someone who has been doing this work for years. But underneath the professionalism, something had shifted. She had been in this industry long enough to have made assumptions before. Not malicious assumptions, or so she had always told herself. Practical ones. Ones based on what the 43rd floor typically looked like. who typically stepped off the elevator, what the Pinnacle Level's guest typically wore. She had been wrong this morning, in a way that felt, the longer she sat with it, less like a mistake and more like a revelation about something she hadn't wanted to examine. The corridor door opened. Claudette Osei walked back through it, envelope back under her arm, coffee cup in hand, the wool coat still buttoned. She crossed the reception area toward the elevator. At the desk, Dominic, who had heard enough of the morning's events from Philippa to understand the rough shape of what had happened, stood up straighter. "Mrs. Osei," he said, "can I arrange a car for you, or anything at all?" Claudette paused. She looked at him. She looked at Serena. There was a moment, and this is the moment, the one you stay for, the one that tells you everything about who a person is when they have every right to make someone feel small, in which Claudette Osei could have said almost anything. She said, "I'm fine, thank you, Dominic." She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Philippa Voss, who had been standing to the side watching all of this, exhaled slowly. She turned to Serena. She didn't say anything immediately. She didn't need to. The silence communicated what a speech wouldn't have. Serena looked at the desk, then at the closed elevator doors, then at the place where the manila envelope had been tucked under Claudette Osei's arm. She thought about the fraying hem on the coat, the mismatched buttons, the Tim Hortons cup. The way she had looked at all of those things and assembled them into a conclusion inside 2 seconds, the way you do when you've been trained, not by anyone in a seminar room, but by every accumulated assumption you've never thought to question, to sort people into categories before they've had a chance to be anyone at all. She was going to think about that for a long time. Raymond Ashford appeared in the corridor doorway. He looked at his staff. He said quietly, "I'd like everyone to convene in the boardroom at noon. All Pinnacle Level staff, no exceptions." He went back into the corridor. The 43rd floor was very quiet for a moment. Outside the tall windows, Lake Ontario was gray-green and wide and entirely indifferent to the small human reckonings taking place 43 floors above its surface. Claudette Osei rode the elevator down. She was not triumphant. She was not angry. She was something more complicated than either of those things. A woman in her late mother's coat, carrying legal documents that transferred 30 years of quiet, determined, unannounced work into her hands, trying to figure out how to carry it with the same dignity with which it had been built. She walked through the lobby of the Harborview Grand, the grand lobby, the one open to everyone, the one with the revolving doors and the concierge desk and the floral arrangement that was changed every Monday, and the doorman held the door. "Have a good afternoon, ma'am," he said. "Thank you," Claudette said. "You too." She stepped out onto Harbor Street. The March air was cold, the way Toronto in March is always cold. Not the deep cold of January, but the stubborn, refusing to leave cold that makes you think spring might never actually come until one day it does. She turned up the collar of Dorothy's coat. She walked to her car. She had a meeting with the solicitor at 2. She had a call with her accountant at 4. She had a long drive back to Hamilton, and a house that still smelled like her mother, and a grief that did not observe business hours. But she had also on this Tuesday morning walked into the building that her mother had quietly owned for 22 years, been told, with a smile, with professional courtesy, with every tool available to a person who wants to make another person feel like they don't belong, to go back downstairs. And she had stayed. She had waited. She had let the document speak. She had done, in other words, exactly what Dorothy Osei had always done. She got in the car. She set the envelope on the passenger seat. She looked at it for a moment. Then she started the engine and pulled out into traffic. The CN Tower visible in the rearview mirror, getting smaller as she drove, until the city folded itself behind her and the highway opened up ahead, long and gray and pointing her home. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been in a room where someone decided, before you opened your mouth, that you didn't belong there, leave a comment below. Tell us where you were. Tell us what you did. We read every single one. Like this video if you believe people deserve to be treated with respect before anyone knows their last name. Subscribe to Birthright Tales, and we'll see you in the next story.